The elevator jolted, lights flickering as the cables groaned. Panic spread fast except for Camilla. She stood completely still, staring at the keypad like it was a puzzle only she could see. Then she realized who was trapped inside with her. The Tycoon, the man who never depended on anyone. The man who could buy the entire building without blinking. Their eyes met, and something shifted. Not fear, not anger. Something far more dangerous for a man like him, uncertainty, because in that suspended metal box, far from boardrooms, bodyguards, and power, he understood something he wasn't ready to say out loud. Camilla knew something no one else did, and the moment her hand hovered over the keypad, he stopped breathing. Camilla didn't move at first. She let the vibration fade through the floor, listening to the tremor echo inside the elevator's steel ribs. The others were already whispering, shifting, searching for someone to blame or someone to save them. But Camilla's attention clung to the keypad, an artifact she'd memorized without meaning to, the way someone memorizes a song overheard too often. She felt a strange pull, like the machine was waiting for her. The Tycoon remained silent, his presence filling the confined space in a way that pushed the air into narrower paths. Camilla sensed his gaze lingering on her hands before moving to her face. No arrogance, no command, just a quiet study that felt unsettlingly human for a man rumored to fire people with a single raised brow. She steadied her breath, sensing he wanted to speak, but refused to break the tension first. Someone behind them began tapping the emergency button repeatedly, each hollow click louder than the last. A man cursed under his breath. Another passenger fiddled with her phone, desperate for a signal that couldn't penetrate steel. Camilla felt the anxiety rising like humidity, thickening every breath, yet something in the Tycoon's posture remained rigidly controlled, as if he refused to grant the situation the dignity of affecting him. It made his earlier uncertainty even more disarming. A faint scent of overheated wiring drifted into the cabin, sharp, metallic, almost chemical. Camilla recognized it instantly. Months working late nights in maintenance hallways had taught her how buildings breathed, how they warned, how they whispered. This wasn't a normal malfunction. This was something misaligned, something forced. She swallowed hard, remembering a rumor that the building's electrical diagrams didn't match the renovated structure. A secret blueprint existed, but no one admitted who had access to it. The Tycoon shifted slightly, just enough that his shoulder brushed the mirrored wall, catching a fragment of distorted light. His reflection fractured into jagged angles, making him look less invincible, more human. Camilla wondered if he felt the same unnerving sensation she did, the sense that someone, somewhere was watching the situation unfold with calm intent. The elevator didn't feel abandoned, it felt observed. A young woman near the door began to breathe too fast, clutching her purse against her chest. Camilla wanted to comfort her, but the Tycoon's proximity locked her in place. His eyes carried a weight she couldn't ignore, as if he sensed she knew more than she allowed herself to admit. Her fingers tingled at the memory of the old technician who once joked that every building has a heartbeat. This one has two. The overhead light flickered again, not in random stutters but in a deliberate rhythm. 3 short bursts followed by a long pause. Camilla's stomach tightened. She'd seen that sequence once, during a training test that had been abruptly discontinued. They were told the pattern indicated a manual override, but no one explained who could trigger it or why. Camilla glanced at the Tycoon. If he recognized the signal, he didn't show it. She tried to control her breathing, grounding herself in the cool metal beneath her palm. But the elevator vibrated again, a subtle sideways shiver she'd never felt in any defunct lift before. It wasn't a drop, not yet. More like a shift in tension, as though the cables were adjusting to interference. The Tycoon leaned closer, not menacingly, but with sharp focus, his voice low enough only she could hear. "You noticed something?" Camilla's pulse jumped. She hadn't expected him to read her that quickly, nor with such precision. He wasn't guessing. He was watching, and not the way powerful men watched, dismissive or assessing, but with genuine curiosity, almost calculation. She felt stripped bare under the scrutiny, as though he could see the memory she carried of the technician's final warning. If the lift ever hesitates, don't trust the first signal you see. A metallic clank echoed above them, followed by a slow roll of mechanical groaning, like gears turning against resistance. The passengers flinched. Someone whimpered. Camilla pressed her lips together, analyzing the sound. It didn't match elevator mechanics. It was deeper, slower, coming from behind the walls rather than the shaft, like something was shifting inside the infrastructure, activating a hidden layer of machinery she'd only heard rumors about. The Tycoon straightened slightly, his calm facade thinning at the edges. For a heartbeat, uncertainty pulsed through him. Not fear, but recognition. Camilla caught it. His gaze flicked upward, then to the seams in the paneling, then back to her. He knew something, too. The realization sent a ripple of adrenaline through her chest. Maybe she wasn't the only one carrying fragments of forbidden knowledge. The temperature rose subtly, as though the ventilation system had stalled. Sweat gathered near Camilla's hairline, tracing a slow path down her neck. She wiped it discreetly, her fingers trembling in ways she hoped no one noticed. The Tycoon did. He stepped closer, not touching her, not crowding her, but aligning himself as if preparing to anchor the room's rising panic through sheer presence alone. A sharp crack snapped through the cabin, startling everyone. A ceiling panel loosened slightly, tilting at an unnatural angle before settling again. Camilla's breath froze. That panel wasn't part of standard maintenance access. It was part of the building's secondary wiring route, a route that, according to the technician, didn't officially exist. Her chest tightened around a disturbing thought. Someone must have activated it. The Tycoon followed her upward stare. "That's not normal," he murmured, more to himself than to her. His tone carried the weight of a man who'd seen too many hidden systems in too many secretive buildings. Camilla wondered how much he knew, how much of the skyscraper's private engineering had crossed his desk, how many files were locked behind corporate silence. For the first time, she sensed he was just as unsettled as she was. Another tremor rippled beneath their feet, gentle but deliberate, as if testing the elevator's balance. The passengers clung to the rails, voices rising again. Camilla forced herself to stay composed, the way she used to steady herself before exams she could never afford to fail. She studied the keypad. Numbers she'd never pressed before seemed to glow faintly, as if lit from behind by knowledge she wasn't supposed to have. She lifted her hand, the Tycoon watching every millimeter of movement. His breathing had slowed, deep and intentional, like he was preparing for whatever her next action unleashed. The air felt heavy, dense, almost magnetic. Camilla hesitated, wondering if the building itself was warning her, or guiding her. That thought both terrified and emboldened her. She placed her fingertips gently against the cool metal frame. A faint hum traveled through the keypad, almost like a pulse syncing with her own. She jerked her hand back, startled. None of the passengers reacted. They hadn't felt it. Only she had. The Tycoon's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in recognition. "It responded to you," he whispered. The words lodged in her spine like a hook impossible to shake loose. She didn't know how to answer. The elevator creaked again, but this time the sound carried a rhythm. Slow, methodical, nearly mechanical, but too irregular to be automated. Camilla's breath hitched. It sounded like movement. Not from the shaft, from inside the walls, as if someone, or something, was adjusting components manually. The Tycoon's jaw tensed. He heard it too. She hovered her hand over the keypad again, torn between fear and necessity. If the system truly recognized her, then she was either the solution or the trigger. The old technician's words flashed like a lightning strike. Some doors aren't meant to open unless the right person knocks. She felt suddenly dangerously like she was knocking. Her fingertip touched the first number. A low, resonant beep vibrated through the cabin, deeper than any tone she'd heard from an elevator before. The lights dimmed, then steadied. The walls seemed to inhale. Every passenger fell silent. Even the Tycoon froze. His breath caught mid-chest. Camilla pressed the second number. A distant response answered, a shifting, scraping sound far below the elevator, impossibly coordinated. And in that moment she realized, someone in the building was responding to her code. Not the elevator. Someone. A hush fell over the elevator, dense and electric, as if the walls themselves understood the implications of that distant response. Camilla pulled her hand back slowly, her skin prickling with a kind of recognition she couldn't explain. It wasn't the satisfying click of a mechanical system. It felt intentional, almost conversational, like an answer rather than a reaction. The Tycoon's gaze sharpened with unsettling clarity, acknowledging something had shifted beyond malfunction. The passengers exchanged frightened glances, but no one spoke. The silence became a thin wire stretched across the cabin, vibrating under their collective breath. Camilla swallowed hard, trying to reconcile the feeling that someone had listened. She wasn't supposed to know this code. No one was. The technician had hinted at old protocols buried beneath renovations, but she never imagined they were still active, much less monitored. Her throat tightened with unease she couldn't mask. The Tycoon stepped closer, his expression angled with quiet intensity. Not fear. That wasn't the elevator's system, he murmured, low enough that only she caught the words. There was certainty in his tone, a man accustomed to recognizing human intervention inside mechanical processes. Camilla's pulse fluttered. If even he recognized the difference, then whatever answered her code wasn't a ghost in the machine. It was something, or someone, familiar with hidden architecture she had only glimpsed. Another hum crawled up through the shaft, softer than before, like a whispered confirmation. The floor vibrated beneath their shoes, subtle yet deliberate, as if trying to stabilize the cabin rather than destabilize it. The Tycoon exhaled slowly, analytical eyes tracing the seams of the walls. He knew more than he was saying. Camilla sensed that deep in her ribs. The building had secrets, and he wasn't surprised they were waking. Her breath fogged the reflective panel in front of her, ghosting her silhouette. She felt exposed, like a spotlight had found her inside the confined space. The keypad's faint warmth lingered on her fingertips, almost pulsing. The Tycoon shifted closer, not to intimidate but to observe. "Why does it respond to you?" he asked softly. The question felt too intimate, too precise. Camilla wished she had an answer that didn't terrify her. The overhead light flickered again, this time in a pattern she didn't recognize. 2 long pulses, 1 short. Her heartbeat stuttered. The technician once mentioned the existence of diagnostic signals embedded in outdated systems, but he never disclosed what each meant. His cryptic smile haunted her memory now. Some things stay active because someone wants them to. She wondered who that someone was, and why she had been made part of it unknowingly. A metallic slide echoed through the shaft like a latch moving far below. The sound was wrong for an elevator at rest. It resembled the movement of a counterweight being manually repositioned. Camilla felt a ripple of dread. Someone was influencing the machinery externally. She glanced at the Tycoon. His jaw tightened with that same awareness. He whispered, "There's a secondary control room beneath this building. Only a handful of people even know it exists." His revelation struck her like cold water. She stared at him, stunned. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The knowledge itself confirmed too much. Camilla's stomach coiled with realization. She wasn't the only person carrying fragments of intentionally obscured information. Their secrets overlapped in dangerous ways. A low, synchronized tension threaded between them, almost magnetic, bound by the unspoken acknowledgement that something far larger was unfolding around them. The passengers began murmuring nervously, their fear circling the cramped space like trapped birds beating their wings. One man demanded updates no one could provide. Another woman clutched her necklace, muttering prayers. Camilla tried to steady her breath. She needed clarity, but the air felt too thick with tension. She sensed the Tycoon watching her again, his presence strangely grounding despite the claustrophobic environment suffocating every rational thought. The elevator lurched, not downward but sideways, a tiny shift barely an inch yet impossible under ordinary circumstances. The passengers stumbled. Camilla reached for the rail, gripping tightly. She looked up, startled. That kind of lateral movement didn't occur unless auxiliary stabilizers activated. But stabilizers weren't designed to move independently. If they were repositioning, someone was controlling them manually, and whoever it was, responded to her input. The realization chilled her. A faint clicking began behind the left panel, spaced evenly like coded intervals. Camilla strained to identify the rhythm. The technician had once tapped sequences on metal pipes to demonstrate how old engineers communicated across maintenance floors. It sounded similar, intentional, controlled, purposeful. The Tycoon lifted his chin slightly, hearing it too. His voice dropped into a whisper edged with recognition. That's not mechanical. It's manual signaling. Camilla's skin prickled. Someone was signaling them. Or signaling her. She took a quiet step toward the panel, trying not to draw the passenger's attention. Her ears adjusted to the frequency, filtering out panicked breathing and low engine hums. The pattern repeated. 3 clicks, pause, 2 clicks, pause, 1 long drag across metal. Her lungs froze. She knew that sequence. It wasn't from training. It was from a memory she didn't want to revisit. Years ago, when she first started working here, she heard that exact pattern late one night while delivering supplies to the basement corridors. The technician dismissed it, calling it the building stretching its bones, but she knew he lied. Now the truth clawed back into the present. Someone familiar with outdated communication methods was alive, active, and monitoring the elevator in real time. The Tycoon observed her expression sharpen. His voice remained quiet, almost steady. You've heard this before. It wasn't a question. She nodded faintly, unable to speak without revealing too much. He watched her carefully as though mapping the history she was avoiding. His next words held something unexpected. Trust. Then you know more than anyone else here about what's happening. She flinched at the weight of responsibility he had unknowingly placed upon her. The clicking stopped suddenly. The silence that followed was sharp, unnatural, as if someone had paused mid-sentence. Camilla froze. The Tycoon leaned nearer, his shoulder inches from hers. The proximity should have flustered her, but all she could focus on was the new sound rising through the shaft. Soft footsteps, impossibly faint, traveling along the maintenance ladder outside the elevator's frame. Footsteps meant only one thing. Someone was physically climbing toward them. Camilla's spine stiffened. Those ladders weren't accessible to regular staff. They required a keycard belonging exclusively to structural engineers. But the company fired its entire old maintenance team last year during a silent restructuring. No one had replaced them publicly. So who exactly was climbing toward the elevator now? She felt the Tycoon slowly exhale beside her, sensing he had reached the same disturbing question. The footsteps stopped directly beside their cabin, separated only by a thin layer of steel. Camilla imagined someone pressing a hand to the metal, listening. A faint scraping followed, metal against metal, as if tools were being repositioned. The passengers went quiet, picking up on the shift in atmosphere. Camilla's heartbeat thudded painfully. Whoever was out there didn't announce themselves. They didn't call for reassurance. They were working silently. The Tycoon angled his body protectively, not touching her, but creating a presence between her and the panel that unsettled her. Whoever is out there isn't part of standard emergency response, he murmured. She swallowed. She already knew that. Emergency teams made noise, called instructions, demanded updates. They didn't creep like shadows tracing secret routes through forgotten infrastructure. A soft tap echoed through the wall beside Camilla, followed by a long metallic drag. Not the earlier pattern, something new. A confirmation, almost a greeting. Camilla stared at the panel, dread and recognition colliding. She knew exactly who used to tap like that. But he wasn't supposed to be alive. The tapping came again, closer, spelling a name she prayed she was imagining. The tapping grew clearer, deliberate, shaping a rhythm that carved itself into Camilla's memory, like a blade pressing against old scars. Each strike against the metal carried a weight she couldn't ignore, an identity she had buried in silence after the technician vanished without explanation. Her breath faltered as recognition spread through her chest. No mistake. No coincidence. The tapping spelled the same 3-beat signature he used whenever he wanted her attention. A private code meant never to be repeated. Her vision swam for a moment, disoriented by the collision of past and present pressing into the cramped cabin. She gripped the side rail to steady herself, feeling the Tycoon's presence sharpen beside her. He watched her closely, his expression shifting as he sensed something had changed inside her. But she couldn't find the words yet. Her throat closed around the unspoken truth. The technician she believed gone was communicating from behind the wall. Another sequence followed. 4 soft taps, a pause, then 2 firm strikes that reverberated through the frame. Camilla's pulse hammered. That set wasn't a greeting. It was instruction. He had taught her the pattern years ago, but only once. She remembered his voice murmuring, "If you ever hear this, don't speak. Don't react. Just listen." She forced herself to stay still, resisting the instinct to step back from the vibrating steel where his presence lingered. The Tycoon leaned in, his voice barely audible. "This means something to you." He didn't accuse. He observed with unsettling clarity, reading the minute tension in her jaw and the tremble she tried to hide. Camilla felt exposed, as though the elevator's walls had turned transparent. She wished she could shield the fragments of forbidden knowledge resurfacing, but the Tycoon's gaze dismantled her defenses with quiet persistence. The passengers whispered nervously, sensing the strange shift in the atmosphere. One man asked if rescuers had arrived, but Camilla shook her head faintly, unable to disguise the dread anchoring her spine. This wasn't rescue. This was contact from someone who shouldn't be alive. Someone who had disappeared into the building's shadows as if the infrastructure had swallowed him. The Tycoon noticed her hesitation and angled his body subtly in her direction, offering silent support. A new sound emerged, metallic fingers sliding along the ladder outside, moving upward with calm precision. Whoever climbed wasn't rushing. They were calculating. Camilla's palms grew damp, her mind replaying the technician's last warning. Some floors aren't mapped. They exist between spaces, built long before this company changed hands. She had dismissed it as eccentric rambling. Now it felt like prophecy. She wondered how much the Tycoon knew about those unmapped levels. The footsteps halted directly beside her, close enough that she could sense warmth radiating through the steel. A faint shadow shifted behind the panel, visible only because a gap in the frame allowed a sliver of dim maintenance lighting to seep through. Camilla's breath caught. The silhouette was unmistakably human. Broad shoulders, deliberate movements, the same posture she remembered from long nights learning the building's secrets. The Tycoon followed her gaze and stiffened. "Is that a worker?" he whispered. Camilla shook her head. "Barely perceptible." "Not anymore," she murmured internally but didn't dare speak aloud. The person behind the wall tapped again, this time with urgent rhythm. She recognized the message instantly. "Step back." Her heart thundered, but she obeyed, pulling away from the panel so quickly the motion startled the passengers. A heavy click echoed inside the wall, followed by a mechanical shift that hummed with controlled intention. The elevator didn't move. Instead, something around them adjusted. Camilla felt the frame brace itself, the cabin securing as though shielded by an external mechanism. The Tycoon sensed it too. He steadied his stance, eyes narrowing with a mixture of calculation and concern. Whoever was behind the wall wasn't improvising. They were activating protocol. The passengers grabbed the rails as another subtle vibration rolled beneath their feet. Camilla felt strangely protected rather than threatened. She hadn't felt that sensation since the technician supervised evening maintenance decades ago, ensuring no worker remained alone in the sublevels. The Tycoon observed her expression soften with familiarity rather than fear, confirming she knew the unseen presence intimately. A faint metallic scraping traced the outline of the panel, almost like a signal telling her to watch closely. The technician was trying to open something, but not the elevator doors. Camilla's chest tightened. She recalled a rumor among older staff. Before the renovation, elevators were equipped with hidden maintenance hatches for quick evacuations. Those hatches were supposedly sealed permanently, but she could hear the locking pins being manipulated with expert precision. One final tap resonated, deeper and more deliberate, like punctuation. Camilla translated it instinctively. "I'm here." She swallowed hard, emotion twisting unexpectedly. The Tycoon caught the subtle shift in her breathing. "You knew him." His voice was low, almost empathetic, but edged with strategic interest. She didn't answer. The truth would unravel too much. Instead, she kept her gaze fixed on the trembling panel. Suddenly, the elevator lights dimmed, plunging the cabin into muted amber. The passengers gasped. The Tycoon lifted his chin, reading the room, analyzing the cause. Camilla knew exactly what it was. Rerouting. Someone was siphoning power into the maintenance grid. She felt a pulse of energy through the floor. Whoever was outside wasn't attempting to restart the elevator. They were isolating it from the rest of the building. The technician tapped again, sharp, commanding, sending a jolt down her spine. She recognized the warning. Do not touch the keypad. Camilla lowered her hand immediately. The Tycoon's eyes widened slightly as he read her reaction. He's preventing you from entering the rest of the code. Camilla nodded faintly. Something in the technician's tone, if tapping could carry tone, felt more urgent than before. A metallic snap echoed above, followed by a soft whir that vibrated the cabin. Camilla's breath faltered. That sound belonged to an emergency rail lock system she had only seen in outdated schematics. Those locks were considered obsolete, forgotten after modernization. Yet someone had kept them intact. Someone had maintained them secretly. She felt a chill. This meant the technician had been working inside the building long after he disappeared. The Tycoon adjusted his stance, his expression tightening with suspicion, not toward her, but toward the building itself. Someone modified this infrastructure without disclosure, he muttered. His tone carried the weight of a man accustomed to controlling assets, unnerved by unseen hands manipulating architecture beneath him. Camilla sensed this situation threatened more than passenger safety. It threatened his authority. A new tapping sequence began, faster, more insistent. Camilla leaned forward, decoding. Her stomach dropped. It wasn't a message. It was a countdown. The technician was preparing to open the hidden hatch. She stepped back instinctively, motioning the others to give space. Move away from the walls, she urged. Her voice cracked the silence, surprising even herself. The passengers obeyed instantly, drawn by the urgency trembling beneath her words. The Tycoon didn't move. Instead, he studied her with an intensity that felt almost invasive. You understand him perfectly, he said, not accusing but analyzing. Camilla exhaled shakily. I learned things I wasn't supposed to, she admitted quietly. His expression didn't harden. If anything, it softened, as though he understood the burden of knowledge gained in hidden corners of systems built to exclude. A metal hinge groaned inside the left wall. The panel shook, dust drifting from its edges as an interior mechanism rotated. The technician was unlocking the emergency hatch manually. Camilla's pulse spiked. That hatch led to a vertical gap between maintenance shafts, a space no blueprint acknowledged. The Tycoon stepped beside her, shoulder to shoulder, forming an unexpected alliance against an unseen force. The final latch released with a dull, heavy thud. The panel trembled outward half an inch, offering a sliver of blackness behind it. Cold air seeped into the cabin, tinged with the scent of machine oil and something older, like dust from forgotten architecture. Camilla's stomach twisted. She wasn't afraid of the darkness. She was afraid of what stood inside it. Then a hand appeared, gloved, steady, unmistakably human, gripping the interior edge of the hatch frame. The passengers gasped. Camilla's heart slammed hard enough to bruise. The silhouette leaned closer, face obscured by shadows. She recognized the posture immediately, the way he anchored his weight, the stillness he held before revealing himself. It was him, but the Tycoon narrowed his eyes, picking up on something Camilla had missed. The glove wasn't standard maintenance gear. It belonged to the company's discontinued security division. The technician wasn't alone. Someone else was inside the walls with him. The hand remained still on the edge of the hatch, fingers curled with controlled tension, as if its owner were measuring the fear inside the cabin before stepping in. The glove, dark and reinforced at the knuckles, contrasted starkly with the matte steel. Camilla's lungs tightened. That wasn't the technician's usual gear. He used frayed canvas gloves, stained and worn. This one was sleek, uniform issued. Someone from the company's old security division was standing in the darkness beside him. The Tycoon caught the detail immediately. His posture sharpened, the subtle corporate poise he'd maintained slipping into something more predatory, more alert. This just stopped being a maintenance problem, he murmured. The words weren't meant for the passengers, but they landed like a verdict in Camilla's chest. Her heartbeat drummed against her ribs. If security was involved down here, in a space that officially didn't exist, then whatever was happening had roots deeper than malfunction. The gloved hand tightened its grip, knuckles whitening beneath the material. Slowly, a second hand appeared beside it. This one ungloved, weathered, familiar. Camilla's breath hitched. The bare hand was the one she knew. The slight crookedness of the index finger where he'd broken it years back. The faint scar along the thumb. The technician. Alive, operating within hidden infrastructure, and standing shoulder to shoulder with a ghost from the company's buried security past. A muted murmur filtered through the hatch, too low for the passengers to decipher. But Camilla caught fragments. The technician's voice, older and rougher, carried that same dry irony she remembered. Another voice, calmer, controlled, answered him. Someone trained to keep emotion out of his tone. The combination unsettled her. This wasn't a rescue team. This was an operation. Pre-planned, coordinated, and somehow triggered by the code she had started to enter. The Tycoon leaned minutely closer, his shoulder brushing the air near hers without quite touching. "They're not surprised we're stuck," he said quietly. They were expecting this. Camilla felt the line of her spine stiffen. She wanted to protest, to insist it was coincidence, but the pattern of signals, the rerouted power, the manual override, none of it fit accidental failure. It felt staged, like a controlled isolation of the elevator and everyone inside it. The technician tapped lightly against the frame, 2 short taps, 1 long, a pattern that made Camilla's heart twist. That was his way of apologizing. He'd used it in the past when shutting down corridors without warning, leaving workers momentarily stranded. Now he was apologizing to her through inches of steel. She understood the unspoken message. "I didn't choose the timing, but I chose to intervene." Her chest tightened with something painfully close to betrayed relief. The Tycoon's voice dropped, audible only beneath the shallow breathing of the passengers. "You trust him," he observed. Not a question, again. The way he read her unnerved her more than the hidden hatch. Camilla kept her eyes trained on the narrow gap, where shadows moved deliberately. "I trust that he doesn't do anything without a reason," she answered. It was the closest she could come to truth, without admitting how much training came from this invisible man. A hinge creaked softly as the panel edged another fraction outward. Cold air spilled in, sharper now, laced with the sterile bite of processed ventilation from levels below. Camilla realized with a jolt that the air didn't smell like the basement's usual dampness. It smelled filtered, regulated, like a sealed environment. That meant the hidden passage connected to an active zone, not an abandoned shaft. Somewhere beneath them, an unofficial floor was fully operational. The Tycoon's eyes narrowed, following the same logic. His expression shifted from wary to calculating, the way it must when he evaluated acquisitions. "There's an unregistered level under my building," he said under his breath, more to himself than to her. Anger didn't flare in his voice, something far more dangerous did. Curiosity sharpened into focus. Camilla realized then that whatever secrets were unfolding were about to collide with his need to know everything inside his domain. The technician's ungloved hand slid further into view, fingertips stretching toward the cabin's interior without crossing the threshold. It was a subtle boundary, a line he refused to overstep without permission. Camilla's chest tightened at the familiarity of the gesture. He was waiting for her to move first, like he always had when showing her hidden access doors years ago. An unspoken question lingered in that reaching hand. "Do you still trust me enough to step toward the unknown?" The passengers clustered near the opposite wall, instinctively distancing themselves from the hatch as though the darkness itself carried danger. One man snapped, demanding to know who was out there, why no one was coming through the main doors. No answer came. The silence from beyond the panel was deliberate. The technician would never address the group. He operated in margins, in side corridors, and forgotten schematics. He spoke only to those he believed could handle what they learned. The Tycoon finally broke the stalemate. "If they wanted us dead," he said calmly, pitched only for Camilla, "we wouldn't feel the stabilizers locking in." His gaze dropped briefly to the floor. "They're protecting the cabin, not sabotaging it." His logic cut through the panic fogging the air. Camilla knew he was right. The rail locks she'd felt engage earlier were designed to hold the elevator in place during seismic disturbances. Someone had chosen to secure them. Another low conversation drifted from the darkness, more distinct this time. Camilla heard her name. Clear, precise, It slid through the hatch and into the cabin like a wire drawn tight around her ribs. The technician was asking for her specifically. The Tycoon stilled, subtle but unmistakable. For the first time, a question etched itself plainly across his face. Why you? She couldn't answer that without pulling years of quiet complicity into the light. The gloved security hand retreated briefly, then returned holding something small and box-shaped, its matte surface almost disappearing into the shadows. A faint LED glowed on one side, cycling slowly between green and amber. Camilla's breath caught. She recognized the device from a single glimpse long ago. A portable override unit, rumored to be used only when executives needed to bypass building systems without creating digital records. Its existence alone confirmed this situation reached board-level secrecy. The technician tapped once against the device, then twice against the frame. Another code just for her. They don't control this. I do. Camilla's thoughts spun. If he had wrestled control of a tool meant for executives, that meant he was operating outside any sanctioned chain of command. The Tycoon watched her reaction with almost surgical focus, piecing together clues she hadn't spoken aloud. He was used to patterns, and she was exposing one without intending to. The cabin felt smaller, as if the air compressed under the weight of converging agendas. The passengers shifted restlessly. Someone sniffled. Someone else muttered that they should have taken the stairs. Camilla barely heard them. Her world narrowed to the gap, the gloved hand, the device, and the quiet man beside her, who held legal power over the building but not, she suspected, over whatever network threaded through its hidden levels. The technician tapped again, rhythm quicker now. Camilla translated inwardly. System override in progress. Do not panic. Do not speak names. The last instruction hit her like a slap. He didn't want her revealing who he was to the Tycoon. Not yet. That meant he knew exactly who stood beside her. She glanced at the Tycoon, wondering how long he'd been aware of people working under his nose without sanctioned contracts. The Tycoon's gaze flicked to the device, then back to her face. Whoever he is, he murmured. He just hijacked my building's emergency grid. The words should have dripped with outrage, but he sounded almost intrigued. Threats that bypassed his authority didn't paralyze him. They engaged him. Camilla felt unease coil with reluctant respect. He wasn't the kind of man who recoiled from shadows. He stepped into them to see who else was there. A sudden shudder ran through the cabin, not violent but deep, like an internal reset. The control panel lights winked off, then on again, cycling through colors she'd never seen during routine operations. Amber, then deep blue, then a steady pale white. The technician had forced the system into a hidden mode. The Tycoon inhaled slowly through his nose, expression unreadable. That protocol isn't in any of the manuals I've signed, he said softly. Camilla lowered her voice. Some manuals were never printed. The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them. The Tycoon's eyes sharpened with sudden clarity, cataloging her sentence like evidence. She'd revealed too much. Still, there was no taking it back. The situation had moved beyond simple passenger versus elevator stakes. She and the Tycoon were now both witnesses to a network operating beneath official knowledge. And witnesses, she knew, rarely stayed neutral for long. The technician's hand disappeared for a moment. A muffled clank sounded from above as something heavy slid into place, locking. Camilla recognized the tone of reinforced clamps securing around the elevator car. Full suspension. Whatever was coming next, they weren't going to fall. The passengers didn't know it, but they were safer than they'd been since the first jolt. The irony made her stomach twist tighter, because safety had arrived wearing an unregistered face. The hatch shifted fully open by another inch, revealing a sliver of the man's face beyond. Aged, lined, eyes brighter than she remembered. They met hers through the narrow gap. Years of unspoken questions collided in that single glance. Regret, humor, urgency, all layered over an alertness honed by hiding in plain sight. He inclined his head, almost imperceptibly, as if to say, "You grew into the role I warned you about." Before she could react, the security figure leaned forward, remaining just inside the shadows. A badge glinted briefly on his chest, a symbol she recognized from old news articles about the building's previous owners. This wasn't corporate security. This was legacy security. tied to a version of the company that officially no longer existed. The insignia had been wiped from public branding years ago. Erased logos, she realized, didn't mean erased loyalties or forgotten chains of command. Yet here it was, alive in the dark, watching her with the patience of something that had waited years to be acknowledged. The badge, the shadows, the silent partnership with the technician, they all pointed to a structure of power that had never stepped into the light of boardrooms or public reports. Camilla felt the skin on her arms tighten, as if the building itself were finally turning its full attention toward her. And when the legacy officer finally spoke, he didn't address the Tycoon. He addressed Camilla, by a title she didn't know she had. Primary conduit, the officer said, his voice carrying through the narrow gap with crisp authority that didn't bother disguising itself. The words slid into the elevator like a foreign object, out of place, and yet disturbingly precise. Camilla blinked, certain she'd misheard. Primary what? His gaze didn't waver. Camilla Reyes, registered in the legacy grid as primary conduit for this sector. The Tycoon went absolutely still beside her, as if someone had just moved his chair mid-negotiation. The title didn't fit anywhere in her life. Barista shifts, janitorial overtime, late-night inventory and half-lit hallways. No contract she had ever signed mentioned anything like that. There's a mistake, she managed, though the words felt thin. The technician's eyes, deep and unreadable, flicked between her and the officer. He didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked guilty. The kind of guilt carried by someone who'd watched a train coming and said nothing. The Tycoon's voice entered the air like a scalpel. She works 3 floors below the lobby and doesn't appear on any specialized access list I've seen. It wasn't a dismissal. It was an indictment of the information itself. His gaze cut toward the officer. Explain what designation you think you hold over my building and over my staff. The word "my" struck the air with quiet possession, his authority pressing against the unseen authority behind the hatch. The officer didn't flinch. Your ownership contract doesn't apply below level 0, he replied. No arrogance, just a simple recitation of fact, the kind that carried decades of immunity. Camilla's heart tripped. Level 0 wasn't on any elevator button, any blueprint she'd ever glimpsed. The technician had once joked about floors that don't know their floors, but she'd taken it as metaphor. The Tycoon's jaw tightened, the smallest crack appearing in his composed exterior. The technician finally spoke louder, voice roughened by recycled air and too many unslept nights. We don't have time for territorial arguments, he said. The grid already registered her input. That's why the car stopped where it did. Camilla felt the cabin tilt without moving. You're saying I did this? She asked, incredulity scraping her throat. He shook his head. I'm saying the building did. It routed you to the handoff point. Camilla's fingers curled around the safety rail, knuckles whitening. She tried to rewind the day. Clock in, broken coffee machine, elevator doors closing around her. The Tycoon stepping in at the last second like some gravitational event. Nothing about her morning felt chosen. Yet here she was being told an architecture she didn't understand had essentially requested her. The officer studied her as if measuring how much truth she could survive without fracturing. You were flagged years ago, the officer continued, ignoring the way the Tycoon's eyes narrowed dangerously. Back when you first infiltrated the maintenance logs to fix the corridor lighting on your own. Heat flushed up Camilla's neck. She'd been 19, exhausted from stumbling home through flickering halls and had guessed her way into the control menu. That was an accident, she protested. I was tired of walking in the dark. The technician's mouth twisted. Accidents don't leave echoes in diagnostic trails, he said. You rewrote a routing table without seeing the map. Camilla remembered staying up until dawn afterward, half proud, half afraid someone would notice. No one ever called her about it. She assumed the system had simply reset. Now she realized something had noticed, something had watched, and instead of punishing her, it had quietly filed her name away. The Tycoon pushed off the wall, the confined space amplifying even that small movement into a shift of gravity. So you've been running a parallel selection program inside a structure I legally acquired, he said, voice low and measured. Using my wiring, my steel, my liability. The officer tilted his head. You acquired air rights, occupancy rights, and projected revenue streams, he replied. The city never sold you the ground under the foundations. The sentence rearranged the floor beneath them. Camilla hadn't even known there was a legal difference. The Tycoon clearly had. His eyes flicked just once, revealing calculation in motion, recalibrating models she'd never see. For the first time since the elevator stuck, he looked less like an unshakable constant and more like a man discovering he'd purchased a painting, without knowing there was another canvas hidden underneath it, signed by someone he didn't approve. "What does primary conduit actually mean?" Camilla asked, cutting through the legal frost gathering between them. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. The officer's gaze returned to her, leaving the Tycoon and his contracts in temporary suspension. "It means," he said, "that when the old grid predicted structural conflict between legacy protocols and corporate expansion, it selected a human interface capable of translating between them." His stare didn't waver. "The system picked you." Laughter almost burst from her chest, sharp and hysterical, but she swallowed it back down. "The system picked wrong," she said. "I can barely afford laundry on the same day as rent." The technician's eyes softened. "That's exactly why it picked you," he murmured. "You work in the shadows of decisions made far above you, but you still fix what they ignore. The grid doesn't need another executive. It needs someone who notices flickering lights." The Tycoon's lips tightened, absorbing the jab that hadn't been aimed directly at him but still landed near. He studied Camilla as though seeing her for the first time. Not as a background employee, but as a variable that had slipped past his models. There was no condescension in his gaze this time, only analysis and something quieter, an uneasy respect for the fact that whatever was happening here, he wasn't at its center. "If this grid has been alive under my feet," he said slowly, "why reveal it now?" The officer's answer came without hesitation. "Because your latest expansion plans cut directly through its spine," he replied. "You signed a demolition order this morning." Camilla felt her stomach drop. She remembered the email announcement: renovations, improved amenities, new executive suites. She hadn't connected them to anything beyond noise and dust. The technician's expression confirmed it wasn't that simple. "You're planning to excavate the northeastern quadrant," the technician added, eyes flicking briefly to the Tycoon. "That quadrant houses the oldest relay core. If they fracture it without rerouting, half this district loses more than lighting." The Tycoon's brows knit. "We vetted the plans. City approved them. No one mentioned a relay core." The officer's gaze was flat. "Because officially, it doesn't exist. That's what legacy means. It functions whether you acknowledge it or not." Camilla's mind raced to keep up. "So this isn't about us being stuck," she said quietly. "It's about the building refusing to let the plan go forward until someone listens." The technician nodded once. "The elevator stopped because your code woke the grid. It recognized you. It routed him." He jerked his chin toward the Tycoon. "Into the same car so you'd both be forced to hear this before the first wall comes down." The Tycoon absorbed that without outward shock. "You're suggesting my building is staging an intervention," he said, a humorless half-smile touching his mouth. "I don't sign contracts with machines." The officer's reply was almost gentle. "The machines already incorporated your behavior into their models. We're just catching you up." Camilla watched the exchange, aware that somewhere above them, conference rooms full of glass and daylight had no idea they were being overruled by buried infrastructure. The passengers clung to pieces of the conversation, understanding little but feeling its gravity. One woman whispered, "Are we in danger?" Camilla turned toward her, the role she'd been dragged into settling around her shoulders like a coat she hadn't chosen but now had to wear. "Not if we do this right," she said. The words surprised her. She glanced back at the hatch. "What exactly are you expecting me to translate?" The officer shifted slightly, the legacy badge on his chest catching a faint line of elevator light. "The grid needs a human signature to authorize rerouting," he said. "Someone it trusts, someone who isn't tied financially to either side." His eyes slid briefly toward the Tycoon before settling on her again. "It calculated your moral drift as stable under pressure." The phrase made her blink. "You ran a personality audit on me without asking?" The technician looked pained. "It's not that simple," he said. "The grid doesn't read thoughts. It reads patterns, timestamps, error corrections, how often you fix things you weren't paid to fix." Camilla remembered cleaning spills in stairwells that weren't her assignment, resetting breakers on her way home, leaving handwritten notes about loose railings. Small acts, she'd assumed, disappeared into the void. Apparently nothing disappeared down here. The building collected her choices like data points, The Tycoon's gaze lingered on her profile, something thoughtful unfurling behind his eyes. "You've been stabilizing my investment without a line item," he said slowly. It sounded less like admiration and more like revelation, numbers rearranging themselves in real time. For the first time, Camilla realized he wasn't merely an inconvenience trapped with them. He was recalculating entire tiers of value, moving her from expense column into some new category he hadn't previously considered. "So what happens if I say no?" she asked, directing the question through the hatch. The officer answered without pause. "Then the grid interprets your refusal as confirmation that there is no viable human liaison," he said. "It reverts to preservation protocols." The elevator seemed to inhale around them. Camilla's voice was barely a whisper. "Preservation of what?" The technician's reply was soft. "Not people. Systems." Her skin went cold. She didn't need more explained. A tremor moved through the cabin, not threatening, but final, like a clock reaching its last second before an alarm. The lights dimmed to a softer hue, awaiting instruction. Camilla looked at the Tycoon. Uncertainty wasn't dangerous on his face now. It was honest. "If I do this," she said, "you'll have to change your plans." He held her gaze. "If you do this," he replied, "I'll finally know what I own." The technician extended his bare hand a little farther through the gap, palm up, waiting, camel-colored dust smudging the creases of his skin. The officer watched silently while the passengers held their breath. Camilla felt the building listening, every wire and bolt attuned to the space between hesitation and choice. She thought of flickering corridors she'd fixed alone, maybe preparing for this. She inhaled, then finally let her fingers fall into his waiting palm. Camilla felt the technician's palm close gently around her fingers, steady but not possessive, guiding her toward the half-opened hatch. The contact sent a ripple through the cabin, a shift in energy that didn't come from the machinery but from the collective understanding that something irreversible had begun. The passengers stared as if witnessing a boundary between two lives. The Tycoon remained still, his expression unreadable, as though he were calculating every consequence branching from her single step forward. The hatch widened another fraction, releasing a colder draft that brushed Camilla's cheek. The technician's grip tightened slightly, urging her closer. Behind him, faint lights flickered in a long, narrow passage barely wide enough for one person. The atmosphere felt different, sterile, intentional, as if the air had been filtered through a system not used anywhere else in the building. She felt a shiver rise from her spine, not from fear, but anticipation of the unknown machinery operating beneath the visible world. The Tycoon's voice reached her before she stepped through. "You don't go alone." He didn't move nearer. He simply asserted the words with a quiet finality that surprised even himself. For someone who never depended on anyone, the idea of letting her vanish into a hidden level was apparently unacceptable. The officer regarded him with an unreadable expression. "She must enter first. The grid responds only to the primary conduit." His tone carried ceremonial weight, like reciting protocol older than any corporate policy. Camilla hesitated, suspended between the two men, between two systems. One she'd spent her life navigating invisibly, and another she knew nothing about but had apparently been chosen for. Her throat tightened. "Will you follow after?" she asked, glancing at the Tycoon. His answer was immediate. "If they open a path, I'll take it." Something in his voice, an undercurrent of concern he didn't permit himself often, pulled her back from panic. She nodded once, grounding herself. The technician tugged gently, drawing her through the opening. As she crossed the threshold, her foot landed on a metal grating that hummed faintly under her weight. It wasn't elevator steel. It resonated differently, like a conduit carrying low electrical currents beneath the structure. The sound vibrated up her leg, almost like recognition. A sensation bloomed in her chest. Uncanny, electric, as though the passage acknowledged her presence. The Tycoon noticed her reaction instantly, his brows lifting slightly. The panel closed halfway behind her, sealing the elevator from the passage with a muted clank that made her stomach twist. She could still see the cabin through the narrowing gap. Passengers huddled together, the Tycoon standing firm, shoulders squared. The technician released her hand, turning to manipulate a hidden lock embedded within the wall. "Don't be afraid of the hum," he said. "It means the grid is awake." The idea that the building could be awake made her pulse jump. She followed him deeper, each step echoing softly along the passage. Overhead, pipes lined the ceiling in organized disorder, some new, some visibly older than the building itself. She spotted a faded label on one pipe written in a script she didn't recognize. "What language is that?" she whispered. The technician paused, eyes flicking up. "It's not a language," he said quietly. "It's an indexing code from the building's first construction phase." A construction phase she had never seen documented anywhere. The officer entered behind her, closing the hatch completely. His presence shifted the air, heavier, controlled. "Walk carefully. The grid listens to pressure changes," he warned. Camilla frowned. "Listens how?" He tapped the metal beneath their feet. "Sound mapping. The original architects encoded resonance routes into the foundation. Footsteps become data." She swallowed, absorbing the unsettling truth. This wasn't just infrastructure. It was a sensory organism disguised as a building. A subtle vibration traveled the length of the passage, like a pulse responding to their movement. The technician's hand brushed the wall. "It's acknowledging your proximity," he said. Camilla wasn't sure whether to feel honored or terrified. Behind her, the Tycoon's shadow moved through the narrow space as he entered, keeping a respectful distance but refusing to remain on the other side of any door she walked through. His presence steadied her far more than she wanted to admit. The passage ended abruptly at a descending metal ramp. Soft amber lights illuminated the path downward. Camilla hesitated at the incline, instinctively reaching for balance. The technician noticed. "Lean forward slightly," he instructed. "The ramp calibrates to human weight. If you lean back, it compensates too sharply." She obeyed, and the ramp adjusted under her feet with surprising grace, almost like an escalator without motors. The Tycoon watched the mechanism with fascinated suspicion. Halfway down, Camilla noticed small copper panels lining the walls, each etched with intricate patterns resembling branching veins. "What are those?" she asked. The officer answered this time. "Neural relays. They carry structural predictions to the grid." She blinked. "Predictions?" He nodded. "The building calculates stress before it forms. It's why it's never needed major reinforcement. It self-corrects." The revelation shattered her understanding of the place she'd been working in for years. The ramp ended at a circular chamber bathed in pale blue light. The sound here was different. Softer, layered, almost like breathing filtered through machinery. Camilla felt her chest tighten in awe and unease. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal made of smooth obsidian-like material, connected to countless thin wires disappearing into the floor. "This is the relay core," she whispered. The technician nodded, though his expression carried something like reverence. The Tycoon stepped forward, examining the structure with narrowed eyes. "This is not standard engineering," he said. "This looks proprietary." The officer tilted his head. "Not proprietary, predecessor." Camilla frowned. "Predecessor to what?" The technician met her gaze. "To every system the corporation thinks it invented." A chill spread across her arms. She suddenly understood the scale of what she had walked into. This wasn't maintenance. This was inheritance. The pedestal pulsed softly, casting a faint light across the floor that shifted as Camilla approached. The technician motioned her closer. "It responds to you," he said. "It always has." His tone was a mixture of pride and regret. She approached tentatively. As she extended her hand above the surface, the light rose to meet her, forming delicate filaments of brightness that traced the outline of her fingers without touching. The Tycoon inhaled sharply, not in fear but in astonished recognition. "It's mapping her biometrics," he said. "Without contact." The officer nodded. "The grid prefers non-invasive interfaces. It reads intention before action." Camilla's pulse thundered. "It can read intention?" she whispered. "In a sense," the officer said. "It matches your decisions against its predictions. It knows whether your choice stabilizes or destabilizes the structure." The filaments swirled, shifting from pale blue to deep violet. The technician's expression changed instantly. "It's ready," he said. "Put your hand on the surface." Camilla hesitated, glancing back at the Tycoon. His expression softened. Not protective, but grounding. "You're not being coerced," he said quietly. "You're being recognized." Her breath trembled. Then she lowered her hand onto the pedestal. Warmth bloomed beneath her palm, surprising and organic. The surface yielded slightly like skin over steel. The lights fluttered, then expanded outward in a ring that filled the room. A resonance vibrated through her bones, a deep, acknowledging hum. Suddenly, lines of light branched outward like roots racing along the chamber walls, following pathways she couldn't see. The floor beneath them thrummed with awakening energy. The officer stepped closer, monitoring a small tablet-like device strapped to his wrist. Symbols flashed rapidly across the screen. Some he seemed to recognize, others he didn't. "The rerouting is starting," he murmured. "But the grid is requesting something additional." Camilla's breath hitched. Requesting what? He hesitated before answering. "It's asking for a secondary signature." The technician stiffened. "It shouldn't need one." The Tycoon stepped forward, eyes locked onto the pedestal. "What signature?" he asked. The officer swallowed. "A financial steward." Camilla turned sharply toward the Tycoon. He froze. The pedestal's violet glow shifted, casting a halo of light around him even though he hadn't moved. "It's identifying him," the technician murmured, stunned. "It wants him." Camilla felt her heart twist painfully. The Tycoon's voice dropped to a whisper. "Tell me what happens if I refuse." The officer answered softly, almost reluctantly. "Then the grid interprets you as an obstruction rather than a participant." A dangerous stillness settled over the room. Camilla felt the building holding its breath. The Tycoon looked at her, not the pedestal, not the officer. Her. Something unspoken passed between them. He stepped toward the pedestal, and the moment he touched the surface, the entire chamber shifted, recognizing him as something the grid had been waiting decades to confirm. The chamber reacted instantly to the Tycoon's touch. Light surged from the pedestal like a pulse of recognition traveling through an ancient bloodstream. The blue-violet glow deepened into a luminous gold, cascading across the floor in concentric rings that stopped precisely at the edges of Camilla's feet. The hum thickened, gaining a new resonance, slower, deeper, almost like two frequencies aligning for the first time. The officer stepped back sharply, stunned. Even the technician inhaled in disbelief. Camilla felt the chamber shift under their combined contact, as if the architecture itself exhaled after a long, held breath. The pedestal brightened until faint glyph-like patterns surfaced on its smooth surface. Shapes she had never seen, yet somehow recognized the logic of. The Tycoon stared at his own reflection in the golden light, eyes narrowing with the realization that the grid wasn't merely acknowledging him. It had been waiting for someone with his exact parameters. Lines of light extended from the pedestal toward the chamber walls, branching like neural pathways searching for dormant nodes. The technician murmured under his breath, "It's unlocking the inheritance layer." Camilla turned sharply. "What inheritance?" The officer's voice was taut. This building was originally designed to be governed by dual liaisons, the conduit and the steward. One interprets decisions ethically, the other stabilizes them structurally. The system needs both to prevent corruption from either side. The implication shook her. The Tycoon's jaw tightened as he processed the revelation. He wasn't simply access, he was architecture. A role encoded before his ownership, before modern shareholders, before any boardroom. Camilla saw something flicker in his expression, not fear but reluctant responsibility. He had spent his life controlling empires. Now an empire beneath that empire was asking him to serve as steward rather than ruler. It unsettled him deeply, yet he didn't pull his hand away. The pedestal adjusted its glow, lowering from gold to a muted amber as if soothing the air around them. Light climbed the Tycoon's arm in delicate waves, scanning him with an intimacy that made Camilla's chest tighten. She wondered what the grid saw: ambition, ruthlessness, precision, some strange blend of discipline and buried compassion. Whatever it measured, it seemed satisfied. The technician whispered, "He fits the algorithm." Camilla felt the weight of that sentence echo through her. As the scanning subsided, new shapes materialized on the pedestal. Two intertwined circles forming a rotating sigil above the surface. The officer's eyes widened. That symbol hasn't appeared since the Foundation's original activation. Camilla leaned closer, mesmerized. The circles shifted with fluid grace, almost organic, suggesting cooperation rather than hierarchy. Slowly, They separated into twin paths of light, one angling toward her, the other toward the Tycoon. The chamber dimmed around everything except those two beams. Camilla felt drawn toward the beam aligned with her, as though it tugged gently at her breath. She extended her free hand instinctively. The moment her palm hovered above it, the beam rose to meet her, forming a floating lattice of light. The Tycoon watched, still holding the pedestal with the other hand. A strange quiet settled between them, threaded with tension and an unspoken awareness that their roles were now intertwined in ways neither could step away from. The technician stepped forward cautiously. "Once you accept alignment," he warned, "the grid will bind your signatures. Withdraw before confirmation if you're unsure." Camilla felt her pulse pound against her ribs. Bind their signatures. Bind their decisions, responsibilities, futures. She glanced at the Tycoon. His eyes met hers, steady, unflinching. He didn't nod. He didn't encourage. He simply held her gaze with the weight of someone ready to stand in whatever consequences followed. She lowered her hand into the lattice. Warmth surged around her fingers, not heat, but recognition. The lattice dissolved into her skin like water turning into memory. The Tycoon inhaled sharply as the pedestal glowed brighter in response. The two beams joined overhead, merging into a single arc of light that circled the chamber. The air shifted again, temperature dropping slightly as though the building were recalibrating its understanding of both of them. Suddenly the floor vibrated, not violently, but decisively, like a machine aligning itself with long-neglected commands. A new sound rose beneath them, a layered resonance of gears shifting, networks rewiring, circuits reawakening. The officer checked his device. His eyes widened. "The demolition plans have been nullified," he whispered. "The grid rerouted authority. It overrode your executive code entirely." The Tycoon didn't react with anger. He reacted with something far more complex. Curiosity sharpened by humility. "You mean the building can reject me?" he asked quietly. The officer hesitated. "Not reject. Counterbalance." Camilla absorbed the distinction. The grid didn't want obedience from either of them. It wanted equilibrium. The technician nodded with a grave smile. "That's why both roles are necessary. You stabilize each other. The building just confirmed the pairing." The pairing. The word hovered between her and the Tycoon. Charged with meaning neither dared address aloud. The pedestal dimmed again, switching to a soft breathing pulse. Lines of light streamed upward along the chamber walls, traveling through conduits toward levels above. Camilla felt the vibrations in her sternum, like the building was thanking her. Footsteps sounded faintly behind her, and she turned to see the officer stepping aside. "It's opening the lift again," he said. "It's safe to return, but you won't return as the same occupants." The Tycoon released the pedestal. The moment his hand lifted, the chamber eased into a gentle oscillation as if recalibrating to two new anchors. He stepped back, his breath steady, but his gaze locked on Camilla with newfound depth. Not hierarchy, not fascination, recognition. She felt heat rise beneath her skin. She hadn't wanted authority, yet she'd walked into an inheritance she never asked for. The Tycoon had chased authority his whole life, and now shared it. The technician approached her, placing a hand briefly on her shoulder. "I couldn't tell you before," he said softly. "The grid forbade interference until activation." She nodded, unable to speak past the knot in her throat. She wasn't angry. She wasn't relieved. She was something in between, someone standing on the threshold of a destiny built decades before her birth. She squeezed his hand once. Gratitude and forgiveness tangled in the gesture. They retraced their steps through the passage, the Tycoon walking beside her now. Not in front, not behind. Equal pace. Equal weight. She noticed how his movements had changed. The ever-present corporate tension in his shoulders had eased, replaced with something quieter, more aware. When they reached the hatch, the panel opened smoothly, responding to their presence as if greeting old friends rather than releasing hostages. The passengers inside the elevator gasped in relief. The cabin lights glowed brighter than before, as though the system wanted to reassure them. Camilla stepped in first. The Tycoon followed silently. Before the technician closed the hatch, he gave her one last look. Proud, weary, relieved. "Remember," he said, "the grid listens to your silence as much as your actions." The hatch sealed behind them with a final, gentle click. The elevator hummed back to life. The passengers clapped, cried, murmured prayers. None of them noticed the brief flicker of light that passed across Camilla's and the Tycoon's hands where they hovered inches apart. Almost touching, the system was acknowledging them again. Camilla pulled her hand back instinctively, pulse tripping. The Tycoon didn't comment, but his glance told her he felt it too. As the doors opened into the lobby, sunlight spilled across the marble floor. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt the same beneath her skin. Camilla stepped forward, unsure of where this new path led. The Tycoon fell into stride beside her, an unspoken agreement forming in the quiet. They were now two halves of an architecture that had been waiting decades to be completed. Not rulers, not rebels, but stewards of a buried intelligence. A voice from somewhere deep within the building vibrated faintly through the floor. Less a word, more a presence, settling around them like a vow. Camilla inhaled, shoulders lifting as though preparing for a weight she already felt. The Tycoon's sleeve brushed hers lightly, an accidental gesture that neither corrected. They walked toward the light, their silhouettes aligned. Far below them, the relay core pulsed once, content, having finally reunited the two signatures it was designed to follow.